Hello, NDSU LA 232 students, as well as anyone else who might be stumbling across my videos. What I'll be showing is how to set up a basic AutoCAD drawing so that you could jump right into chapter 17, I believe, of this textbook, where the authors talk about how you can render it using layers and masks in Photoshop. He doesn't really talk about setting up the AutoCAD file, so that's what I'll be doing now. And what I'm showing, it's a handful of good practices. It's not the absolute only way or the necessarily best way. I happen to like it, but it's a pretty good system, I think. So I'm going to start by creating a new file using the acad.dwt template. And you may want to take a moment to make sure your drawing environment looks like mine. I have the drafting and annotation workspace selected up here. Also keep an eye on these buttons in the lower left hand corner. For example, I'm going to activate ortho mode for this first thing that I'll be drawing. I've also got dynamic input turned on, so you should see things as I type them. For example, I'm going to type config and hit enter on my keyboard. That brings up this options dialog. And the reason I'm doing this is there's another setting I think that you should match, and I believe it's under user preferences, right click customization. I've got time sensitive right click turned on, set at 1/2 second. Now what this does, it allows me to hit the right button and have it act as enter. I'll be hitting enter a lot, either on my keyboard or via a right click, and I'll be hitting escape a lot. I'll try to tell you when I'm doing that, but this setting will help you follow along. If you're on a Mac, this is underneath the preferences. That config command doesn't actually bring this up, so you'll just want to go up to your preferences to set that. So I'll go ahead and zoom out. I've got my ortho turned on, and I'll just start. I'll just type line, hit enter, kind of pick a point down here. It doesn't really matter. And in this direction, I'm going to type 300 and hit enter. Now I want to zoom out again. Oh, and sometimes this happens where you can't zoom out anymore. So if you ever run into that situation, just hit escape on your keyboard, type regen, hit enter, and you should be able to zoom out further. I usually don't run into that until a little later. All right, I will type line again, hit enter. This time I'm going to hold down shift and right click and select endpoint. Now I can snap to this endpoint. 300, 300, enter, and then C, enter. Oops, that didn't close like I wanted it to. That's all right, because I'll just do an undo and do that again. It's because I stopped that initial line, so the closing wasn't where I thought it would be. So I'll just snap it. The same effect. This is all right. Now another thing you might want to do is type units and hit enter. And AutoCAD is really unitless. It just cares that I drew 300 units. And this drawing units dialog is set to have inserted content be in inches. Well, I want that to be feet. And that will make sense, hopefully, more later on. But go ahead and set that to feet and hit OK. So we've kind of got a good start here. Doesn't seem like much, but this will represent our site. And a good practice that I would recommend, which is different than in SketchUp, for example, or even the Adobe suite, is to name layers for the different materials. AutoCAD was really born out of a construction world where things were drawn to be built, and hopefully they still are. But a good practice is, if it is a specific material or a thing in your drawing, make it a layer. And I typed layer and hit enter. That brings up my layer properties manager. I'll hit this icon here, and we'll call this site. And I'll set the color to, oh, I don't know, maybe this kind of teal color here. Hit OK. Now that doesn't change because I just created the layer. I didn't necessarily assign this to that yet. That's easy to do. Select it, and hopefully underneath your home ribbon option, there we go. I'll hit escape. First part's done. Let's see here. Not too bad. Now, I'll use my layers quite a lot, so let's just kind of keep that off to the side. A few other things I'll be drawing. One is a water feature. I'll have a few structure elements in terms of maybe a building and a kiosk, a gazebo, some vegetation, some paths, a beach area or a sand area. I don't know if this is necessarily a beach, and maybe a habitat area. I don't know. And as I'm going about this, I'll kind of do it a little sloppy, kind of intentional. Also, kind of, that's just how I model. So I'll create things on the fly. If you know ahead of time what all of your layers are going to be, you can create them ahead of time. So I'll type water underscore edge. Conventions for this, there are a lot of them, and a lot of times you'll see people start with P and E for proposed and existing. I won't get that sophisticated. I'll just name these somewhat logically for now, keeping in mind this is a very introductory AutoCAD tutorial. All right, I created that water edge. I'll make it, how about that blue there? Hit OK. Also, colors don't really matter. This is not really a presentational medium. It's more for what makes sense for you, or more for what meets the standards for whatever firm you might be creating this for or in. Now, how do I set that to be my active layer? Well, I just double click right next to water's edge. Now, let's see, how should we draw this water's edge? How about we do a spline? Yeah, let's do a spline. I'll type spline and hit enter. Now I don't want this to take up too much of my screen, maybe a quarter, and I'm also going to turn off that object snap. Now, the reason I started with my site, I'll be doing a lot of trimming. So I'll intentionally start this out here, and oops, I've still got my ortho snap on, so maybe my water comes in and it goes back, and I'm clicking, and all right. That looks pretty good. So I will right click when I'm done. This will be water. This will be land over here. To trim, you can just type TR and hit enter. And I like to select from the left from the right going to the left. Then I will click, right click, click, right click. Whoops. Now, notice when I right clicked there, it booted me out. The reason why is because I didn't right click fast enough. I'm trying to go slower than I normally go because I want you to follow along. And underneath user preferences, remember this setting here. If I don't right click within half of a second, it resorts to something other than enter. So that's why that didn't trim, but let's do it again. TR, hit enter, select, right click, left click. Rewind, try it again if that didn't make sense. But I'll be doing that for the other items as well. Well, what else should we draw? How about a couple paths? Now this time I will create it after the fact. And will I use spline again? How about I'll use an arc this time? Maybe one path starts up here and kind of curves down like that. And I'll right click. Ooh, I did it in time. That was good. My other path maybe comes down here and goes up and meets this path like that. All right, so one path comes here, one path does that. Well, this could be a center line. It can be an edge. It's definitely too skinny to be a path since it's just a line. So what I will do is type offset, hit enter. Now, AutoCAD is always wanting information, and you'll be doing a lot of numeric input. I can either give it a number and hit return, or I can click on my screen to reference some geometries, but I want this to be 8 feet, so I'll type 8 and hit enter. Whoops, don't do that. Notice I just put that little tick mark for feet. I'm thinking like SketchUp, but don't want to do that. Hit backspace. Now I'll hit return. Now it wants to know, okay, what do you want to offset? I'll click here and click there. Now, if this were a center line instead of an edge, I'll do offset 4 enter. This time I would do it like, oops, it's still set to 8. Let's erase that. So E enter, click enter. Get used to that a lot. Input, enter, left click, enter. It's just the way it is. So let's try this again. Offset 4 enter. There we go. It didn't register last time, so I'll click on this side, and right away I'll click on that side. So just 2 different ways. One was just treating it as an edge and I offset it. This would be if it were a center line. Center lines are a little bit more conventional, but now it's just a matter of cleaning up. AutoCAD is a lot of going 3 steps forward and then 2 steps backwards. How do we clean this up? Let's use the trim again, which I believe you can do TR, hit enter, maybe not. Let's escape, hit escape a few times, TR, enter, drag, enter. Now I should be able to just click to clean up those edges. Now watch what happens here. I will intentionally not do this one. I really should do that one first, but I'll do these 2. And oops, now I've got this line here. How do I get rid of that? Well, hit escape, select it, and hit delete on your keyboard. So all right, there's my path. And I also forgot this part down here. Let's do that. TR, enter, select, enter, click, click, done. Okay, so a couple problems here. It's kind of a hard-edged path. And you know what? Where is this? I didn't even mention this. Maybe it's in a park. We'll call it a park. How about? Or maybe some kind of national wetland trail. I don't know. Maybe it's at the lakes. Doesn't really matter. But that's kind of a hard edge for a pathway. That would make more sense if it had a nice sweeping curve. So if people are on their bikes or rollerblades, they can fly through there. So there's kind of a design thing there. But it's also in the wrong layer. So let's do this. Let's select just one. Then up here, I will set this to, oh, whoops, I didn't create the path yet. So escape, escape. Let's create a new layer. Call it path. Oh, and say, how about an orange color? There we go. Now I can select this line and set it to path. Why did I do it that way and not all of them? Well, there's a really useful command I guarantee you will like and use a lot. It's match properties, and you can activate it by typing MA and hitting enter. Now I'll click on the source and I'll just keep clicking until I've set everything that I want to match. And then when you're done, you can hit escape on your keyboard. So that comes in handy, MA. You'll notice also that I like to use commands. Commands have been working like this forever in AutoCAD, and they probably will continue to do so. All right, let's address that that kind of hard corner here for this path. If I want that to be a nice sweeping path. Another tool you will use a lot is fillet, and you can just do F for fillet. Hit return. Okay, look at all of my options here. I can undo, well, it's kind of hiding, polyline, radius, trim, multiple. I want to do R for radius, so R, enter. What do I want this radius to be? Oh, how about 20 units, and hit enter. Now I can finally click on things. I'll click here, I'll click here. Man, look at that. You know, that's maybe not as much as I would like. Maybe I want that to be 30. Well, let's do this again. F, enter, R, enter, and I'm going to type 30, enter. And make sure you click somewhere down here, not on this polyline that was created. It actually created another little separate entity there. So I'll click here, then click here. All right, there's my 30 radius fillet. Hit E, enter, and let's get rid of that. All right, let's type F again. Now this time I'll just click on my objects because it will remember that radius setting. All right, so I've got my path kind of set up, and I've got some area available in here in case I wanted to put maybe a little kiosk. Not looking so bad. All right, so we got our path done. How about some structural elements? Maybe there's a shelter area for picnics and maybe a gazebo and maybe a kiosk. So things that are projected off of the ground plane. I will create a new layer and we'll call it structure. You can always, of course, come back and rename these. Now, how about purple? Again, keeping in mind, this is not presentational. I just want these colors to be different enough so they make sense to me, and that's about it. Because they're easy to change down the road. All right, so let's do maybe a, how about 25 foot, 20 by 30, 20 by 35. Let's do that. A 20 by 35 foot building at an angle over here. Ooh, how do we do all that? Well, let's start typing rectangle. If you're ever unsure, you can usually just start typing and you'll be surprised how many tools are logically named. Rectangle. Okay, if I start drawing, I could do that and then rotate it. Let me undo that because there's another step. If you take your time as you're learning AutoCAD, it'll make things easier down the road. Just trust me. Read all of the commands when you're first using it. So look at these options again. Chamfer, elevation, fillet thickness, width. Oh, how come I'm not seeing rotate? Oh, because I haven't started it yet. Watch this. If I click to start, now I've even got more options. Now I can do area, dimension, rotation. So R, enter. How do I want to rotate this? Oh, maybe about like that. How about? Click. Now I can set the size or the dimensions. Can I type D, enter? Is that gonna work? Oh yeah, so my length for my rectangle, what did I say, 25? I think I said 20. Enter. The width, 35, enter. That's kind of tiny. You know what? I'm going to undo that. Yeah, well, we'll just draw it in, and you know what? Let's do it this way. Let's click on it, grab a corner, and maybe, hey, all of a sudden it's not a rectangular shelter, it's a trapezoidal shaped shelter. Maybe it's a band shell. But I just wanted it to be bigger. Oh, and also I forgot to set my layer to structure. No problem. We'll just go ahead and change it. And I'll set that while I'm here. All right, so there's my trapezoidal shaped shelter. And what else? How about a little informational kiosk? And I picture those in my head to be polygonal. So I'll start typing polygon, hit enter, 6, enter for sides. I'll just kind of eye this here. Inscribed or circumscribed. Oh, how about inscribed today? And let's make that 4. Yeah, that's all right. So there's my little 4-foot radius informational kiosk. Another thing I'm not really addressing in this is annotation. I'm not going to go into labeling this. Again, I'm really just preparing this so we can conveniently export a bunch of layouts and then take them into Photoshop, which I'll be doing in another video. But back to this. What else should we put in here? Oh, how about a gazebo up in the corner that will be hiding amongst some vegetation that we will draw here in a moment. So once again, polygon, and I'll click. Oh, the number of sides. Oh, let's make this one 8. And then I'll click inscribed is fine. How big should this be? I don't know. How big are gazebos? How about 8 radius? That seems pretty small. Let's undo that. And polygon, 8, enter. This time I'm going to do 12. It's a pretty big gazebo, I guess, but. And you know what? While we're up here, I'll draw in the roof lines. You can either use line or polyline. They're both good. And again, if I shift and right click, I can invoke my OSnap tool set. I'll hit escape, or I can just come down here and turn on my object snap. And furthermore, if you right click on that and go to settings, here's where you can set your object snaps. And it defaults, I believe, to these in point center, intersection, etc. Let's hit OK. It is turned on. I'll type line, and now I can just do this. And now here's a situation where I'm right clicking really quickly to make sure it activates as a redo. So right click if you do it within a certain amount of time, it will repeat the last step, and you will see that again here a little bit later. All right, so we've got some water. I've got a pathway. I've got some structure. Oh, should we do some vegetation? You know what? We will, but before we do some vegetation, I want to draw in maybe a sandy area for maybe a beach. So let's create that layer. I'll just call it sand. And how about yellow? Why not? I'll use the spline again. And another thing you can do with your snaps is you can type them in. Let me bring up that settings one more time. Oh, it does not have it. It used to show the 3-character shortcut. And so you'll just have to trust me on this one. The nearest is NEA. So if you type NEA, hit enter, it's snapping to the segment nearest your cursor. I use that quite a lot for arbitrary things like this. So I'll start, and I'm using spline, just clicking carefully, and then when I get close, I will type NEA again, hit enter, and I'll click right there. Now splines are kind of weird. They kind of want to keep on drawing here until you either hit return or escape. I think escape is what I want. Whoops, escape is not what I wanted because it escaped me out of the whole thing. So that's all right. You get to see me drawing this again. NEA, click. Let's try return this time. There we go. Return is the key that I wanted. And once again, I didn't put it in the right location. Okay, what else should we put on here? Oh, how about like a patio / boardwalk area? Maybe something that extends out from the weird shaped covered picnic area, and maybe it goes out over this water and maybe extends over here. And let's call this, I'll call it boardwalk / patio. And what is this going to look like? Oh, how about we do a polyline? This time I'll just click on the tool since I happen to be in the neighborhood on my screen. And you know what? I'm feeling kind of abstract today, so we're going to make this an abstracty boardwalk. I think I can do C enter for close. Yes, I can. So there's my boardwalk, and I want to trim because we wouldn't actually see this part if we're looking at this in plan. So let's do a trim. Select these, enter. I'll get rid of that, and we'll have our path actually cut right through that. And our water, sure, why not? I think I'll come back and fix that here in a moment. Oh, and once again, I set it to the wrong thing. Okay, so we got ourselves a boardwalk. I'm going to change that color. How about maybe this darker brown? All right, that updates. Okay, now we need to do some vegetation, and there's a very specific way I would like you to do this. Now, there's tons of block vegetation things out there, so you can just find them and import them. But, you know, it's kind of a little helpful exercise here to create this. And think of vegetation like layers. Start at the ground and move up. Well, there's ground cover, you know, like a juniper or something. Then there's hedges. Then there's small trees, and then there's large trees. And then there's deciduous and evergreen trees. So you can make as few or as many layers that are logical to you. Now, before I start creating these, I'll kind of do this on the fly. But here's one thing I would recommend. Good practice for creating blocks. Draw them in layer 0. Then assign the block to a layer. The layer will inherit or set the block color. So just trust me, you wouldn't want to draw this in a vegetation and then block it. It causes kind of headaches down the road, so keep that in mind. All right, how about we draw 3 types of vegetation? I'll do an evergreen, a deciduous tree, and then a shrub. Over here, and I'm intentionally going to do it off to the side because it'll make sense here in a moment. Just trust me. So let's start with a circle. I'll just click anywhere. How big should this be? Well, if you're working with a specific type of plant or tree, you should probably know what its mature width is, but I'm going to say, oh, how about 15 feet? So that would give us a 30-foot radius tree. We'll change the size on this in a moment here. So just trust me, just go with me on this. That will be my evergreen. No, that's my deciduous. Here's my evergreen. So click over here. These are usually a little bit smaller. So how about 8? Enter. And then circle once more for what will be a shrub. How about? This guy will only be 3. Enter. So he's kind of small. All right, so let's clean these up. Now, you can draw these however you want. There's a million ways to draw trees. If nothing else, if you're just learning AutoCAD, maybe follow along. Try to match my tree. It will be a good drawing exercise. Here's what I like to do for deciduous trees. I will type copy and hit enter, select this and hit enter, and I'll just move it off a tiny bit and then hit escape. So it's kind of a style thing, just trust me. Then I will do P line. Now you'll notice I sometimes jump between polyline and line. When in doubt, I would say do a polyline, which is P line. And then I'll type send, enter. That will bring up the center snap. And I'll draw a line out here. And I'll right click really quick, because if you right click fast enough, you can do it again. Which is draw a polyline. Now I'm going to turn on my snap, my object snap down here. And I'll do one more. Oops, I don't like that one at all. So let's get rid of that. Erase, enter, select, enter. I'm going to turn off my snap. I changed my mind. Polyline, end, enter. Because I didn't want this to snap to that nearest. All right, there we go. So I just hit escape. There's not a bad tree. How can we make this even a little bit more stylistic? Well, I'll type circle and I'll just maybe do a small circle over here. And then maybe an ellipse, why not? Ellipse. And I'll draw a small ellipse over here. Why did I do that? Well, this is just kind of how I see these sometimes. Now I'll do trim again. You'll notice that you start to see a lot of tools used different ways. And as I move along in this tutorial, I'm going to say less and less exactly what I'm doing. You should know by now, after you start a command, you have to hit enter to invoke it and get it to start working, which is what I did right there. All right, that one looks pretty good. Let's draw an evergreen. So line. This time I'll just do line. Why not? And also I'll do shift, right click. That will allow me to bring up this dialog, another way to access the snaps. Hit escape. And I'll do an array. I want to copy this in a bunch of times in a circle. So I'll type array and hit enter. Select my object, hit enter. And I want to do a polar. These are the 3 types of arrays that you can do out of the box. And polar just means in a circle. So the center point, end, enter, click here. Now by default, it does 6 pie shapes. It looks like Trivial Pursuit. And you've got these handles on here you can play with. Watch this. If you click this one, it does kind of this weird shootout thing. You don't want to do that, so hit escape. If you grab this one, the little angle, it sets the angle. And if you drag it left and right, you'll see what it does. Now I'm going to make this smaller. I'm changing the angle, but it's keeping the 6 divisions. Now, by doing that, it is giving me another handle that you can grab and drag, and look what's happening. I'm doing myself a nice polar array. All right, looks pretty good. Hit escape. Here's a situation where I want to explode it, because that creates kind of a special little thing that you can come back and change after the fact. For example, maybe you want to change the number of copies or the angle. So it's kind of a dynamic shape. I forget exactly what it's called. It's not a dynamic component. That would be SketchUp. But what I want to do is explode. E-X-P-L-O-D-E. Select that shape and hit enter. Now these are all individual pieces that you can select and delete. So here's what I'll do. E, enter. And I'm just going to click on a few of these. And here's where the kind of design sense is introduced, because stylistically, evergreens have a few less of these lines on the top than on the bottom. So after I've got a few selected, I'll hit return. I'm going to do that again. E, enter. Let's get rid of a few more of these guys. Okay, that's all right. Let's go back over here. We'll work on the shrub. Okay, you know what? I'm going to do two things here. These are individual pieces of plants. And sometimes you just want to represent an area. There is a super cool tool you can use called Rev Cloud, Revision Cloud. And it's just REVCLOUD. You can just start typing and you'll see these options show up. So I'll go ahead and click on it. Here's what it does. It draws kind of these bubbly, cloudy shapes. And they're really made for redlining. You can go into a drawing. Let me erase that. And maybe you're drawing this up for the principal of the firm or a client. Now the client wouldn't be doing this. Somebody's going to come in here and they're going to say, they're going to circle this in your drawing, and then they're going to put some text in here and say something like, what's going on here? And then send it back to you, and you got to fix it. But whoops, I erased too much. Let's just undo. How about? All right, back over here. But here's another nice thing about Revision Cloud. Maybe you just got a big area of trees that you need to show. Rev Cloud. There we go. There's my ecosystem. Done. Let's hit E for erase. Select that and hit enter again. There's a few other things you can do with the Rev Cloud. You could either just draw a small shape. I gotta change my arc style here, so let's undo that. Or you can select an object to inherit the settings for your Revision Cloud. What does that mean? Well, let's do this again. Rev Cloud once more. Look at the options. I got arc length, object, and style. I'm going to do A for arc length. A, enter. What is my minimum length? Oh, my minimum will say, how about is 1, enter. What is my maximum? Oh, 2, enter. How about that? So it'll just kind of arbitrarily now draw those arcs between 1 and 2. So there's a little kind of bushy shape. But here's what is kind of nice about Revision Cloud. REV, once more. Revision Cloud. Look at the second thing down here is object. So let's see what happens. Oh, enter. Now I can select this shape. And I've got an option now to reverse direction. What happens when I do that? Ooh, it kind of does something neat. So that looks more like maybe a stylistic shrub. We'll call that good. Let's erase this guy. Okay. Stylistically, there's a few more minor things we can do. And what I'll do is change the polyline width, which is different than the line weight. The width is related to the real world measurement. The line weight is related to the represented or printed world. So we want to do a polyline width. How do you do that? You have to do a polyline edit. And I'm sure the tool is up here somewhere, but I can only remember the shortcut, which is pedit, P-E-D-I-T. Hit enter, and I'll just select all of these polylines. Oops, I forgot a step. Hit escape. Polyline edit, enter. Now look down here. What are my options? I can either select my polyline or M for multiple, which is what I want to do. M, enter. Now I can do multiple. Enter. Sometimes you'll be asked, do you want to convert these things to polylines? Yeah, sure. Why not? Look at all the options you can do. You can close, open join, spline, etc. we want to do width. What do I want to set my width to? Oh, how about 0.125 feet, which would be 1/8 of a foot or 3 inches? Something. I don't know. So that made that whole thing thicker. You know what? I don't like that. I don't want to do the whole thing thicker. I just want to do a couple small pieces of it. So I'm going to do an undo, which is Control Z. And let's do that again. P edit for polyline edit. M and then enter. This time I'll just click. Oh, how about that one? How about this one? That one. Okay, now I'll hit enter. Once again, asked if I want to convert them to polylines. I will hit enter. I'll do width and I'll do 0.125. Enter. All right, so it seems minor, but it, kind of makes a difference how these are represented. On to our little deciduous guy here. I'll use match properties again. That comes in handy, which is MA, enter. And you have to go first on what you're matching from. I'll click on that polyline there. Now I can, oops, it's not doing it. Why is it not doing it? Remember, when I drew this, I just did normal lines instead of polylines. What do you need to do to fix that? You need to do a polyline edit again, which also converts lines, I forgot to do the multiple, to polylines. Hit enter, convert these to polylines, yes, enter. And now I can just hit escape, because all that did was turn these into polylines. Now I can do an MA, enter, click, and we'll just do a few of these. Okay. That's kind of looking like a stylistic, sort of simple evergreen. Okay, on to our little shrub guy. How about we do offset? I'll type offset, hit enter. As before, you can give it a numeric input, or you can just click on your screen to reference. So in this situation, I'll just eye it. I'll click on 2 points. I'll click here, and then I'll click, oh, how about here, which says offset it that much. Now I need to click on my object. There we go. How about one more time? Okay, so that was a really tiny offset, but there is my little shrub shape. Okay, at this point, you could start copying. I'll type copy, enter. Don't do this, but you could right click and then just start shotgunning these in here. That would be bad, because if you ever wanted to change these, you'd have to change each one. That's a headache. So I'm going to do an undo. We want to turn these into blocks, which are really just AutoCAD drawings. It's kind of like exporting, which is also kind of nice. As you're doing AutoCAD, you might draw something and be like, hey, that's kind of cool. Oh, and you know what? There's something really, really important that I've not done, and that's save my file. I should have did that an hour ago. I'm going to save this on my desktop. Oh, and I'll put this in a folder. I guess it's called new folder. And let's call this basic drawing. Good idea. You might want to save your file. Now you can save your blocks. You don't have to save your big file to your blocks, but generally a good idea. How do you create a block? It's W block, which stands for right block. Hit enter, and we've got to this dialog with a lot of important things that we need to pay attention to. Now, the first thing I'd recommend is the destination. Put these in the same folder. For my students, anyone else, you can put it wherever you want. But for my students, you guys want to put this in that same folder where your parent drawing is created. You don't have to do this, because when it's in the model, it's embedded in the model. But this is important for a few other reasons. And I'm going to create a new folder, right click and rename it, and I'll call this My Blocks. And then double click on it. So now these will be saved in here, and I'm going to call this tree dec.dwg. Okay, seems minor, but it's kind of important. Set this to AutoCAD 2010. Why is that? Well, You can open up drawing files in Illustrator, but you can't open up 2013 drawings in Illustrator. I won't be doing that in this video, but just good to know, because you could open this up and stylize it some more. Use it for other things only if it is a 2010 file. Hit save. That just sets the destination. Okay, the other things we want to set is the base point. So click on that. And how about we do a shift right click, select endpoint, because I want this to be exactly right here. Just ignore those numbers, but that sets the base point for that drawing. Select objects. That's also pretty important too, because I only want this tree. Hit enter. So I've got my objects, I've got my base point, I've got my destination. This option here is important, convert to block. What this is asking is, what do you want to do with this shape once it is turned into a block? Do you want to keep it as just kind of free form geometries, or convert it or delete it from the drawing? We'll do convert to block. We could actually do a delete from drawing too, but we'll do convert to block. Insert units is feet. That is good because that's the units I've got in my drawing. I think I might run into a problem here. I just thought of something, so let's see what happens when I hit OK. Oh, good, it worked. Oh, I already set my units. I couldn't remember if I did that or not. Had I not done that, this would have blown up by a factor of 12. But it is now a block. We can now move on and do the same thing with this guy. W block, enter. I will do this one faster because you should know how to do this. Convert to block. What do we want to call this thing? This time I'll just change the name because it should keep it in the same destination. Tree evergreen, hit OK. All right, that one is done. Last one, pick point. There's not really anything to snap to here, so I'll just kind of eye it. That looks pretty good, about in the middle. Select my objects, hit enter. What is the name of this guy? How about shrub? Okay, hit OK. All right, so at this point we could copy. You might think, all right, now it's okay. I know I wasn't supposed to do this before, but since it's a block, I can do it. Well, yeah, you could, but there's kind of a problem here. This is kind of a communication buzzkill when everything looks exactly the same. Your mind kind of picks up on that repetition, and it would be nicer if these were all slightly different scale, slightly different rotation. So I'm going to do an undo a few times. And here, you don't even need these guys anymore. You can select them and hit delete. And why is that? Because once they're created, or once you've got your own library, you can insert them. So I'll go up here to insert, click on insert, and it should know or remember the last or any blocks that you've created while in this session. So here they are right here, neat. Or you can browse to them if you happen to have a folder full of hundreds of other trees that you maybe just found somewhere. But we will insert this tree deciduous, and you know what? I'm gonna cancel out of here because I'll make a layer and we'll call this vegetation. And how about, oh, a nice bright green. And I will set that to the active layer by double clicking to the left of the name. Now, remember what I said before, you can have as many layers that are logical. If this was a true planting plan, this would be much more sophisticated than what I am showing you. And I'm tempted even to do different layers, maybe a ground cover, shrubs, and then mature canopy trees. But you know what, we'll just call this vegetation, make that active. Go to the insert option, and we'll do a few of these deciduous guys first. But let me talk about these. They're really important. And incidentally, if you're on a Mac, you have to hit a little expansion button in order to see these. My insertion point, I will specify on screen. My scale, I will specify on screen. And I'm also going to click uniform scale. That will keep these from getting really distorted. Rotation, I will also specify on screen. All right, that all looks good. Hit OK. And oh, how about we fill up this area here? So my first click sets the location. Now, as I rubber band back and forth, I can set the scale. So sometimes you got to zoom in here, and you can also type it. Maybe I want this to be exactly 1.1. Hit enter. Now I can set the rotation. I'll just rotate it a little bit. All right, that seems like a lot of work, but it's really not that bad. So let's do this again. Insert. And this one will be right next to it. How about? There we go. So here's a situation where right-clicking makes this really fast, but now it's much too late. If I right-click, oh, it did still work. Okay, my right-click repeated the last command. I had that backwards. It'll either repeat the last command or it will function as an enter. And I believe your spacebar does the same thing. So you can hit spacebar. There's lots of ways to do this. So all right, I'll just shut up for a moment and do a few of these really fast, hopefully. Whoops, I picked a shrub. Didn't want to do that. How did I do that? Tree deciduous. So I guess if you really want to, you can follow along or maybe just fast forward. Let's do a few of evergreens. All right, let's see. Also, I need to check uniform scale. Maybe this gazebo is kind of hiding in a little grove of protective evergreen trees. And there always seems to be kind of a little straggler out here. All right. Oh, maybe a couple down here. And what else? Maybe one right here. Okay, so for the shrub, right click to bring that up again. Uniform scale. I'm just going to put in one. Maybe these, since these are a little bit smaller and it's not as easy to pick up on that repetition, I'll just do the standard copy command. So CO, which is copy, or you can type out the whole thing if you want. I'll click here, right click, or hit enter. Then it doesn't really matter where I start or stop. I am just setting points. So maybe these are a little bit more formally drawn in here. Oh, how about this pattern? There we go. And then maybe there's a few more over here. All right, award-winning design going on. Okay, the one other thing, I didn't really do that revision cloud. So maybe we're somewhere in northern Minnesota and there's a little cattail habitat. How about we'll call it here? Should I draw this in vegetation? You know what? I'm going to make that its own thing. Cattails. All right. I don't know the scientific name off the top of my head. We'll do kind of this brownish green. And we'll revisit Rev Cloud. We'll just click, and you know what, those? I'm going to hit escape for two reasons. One, I didn't set that to be the default layer, and Rev Cloud, I'm going to change that arc width again. So after you've typed Rev Cloud and hit enter, type A and hit enter, and for the minimum, I'm going to do 10. Enter, and for the maximum, how about 15 enter? Let's see if that works. You know what? I changed my mind. E for erase. Let's load up the Rev Cloud. A, enter. I'm going to change that to 5 for the minimum and maybe 12 for the maximum. There we go. That's a little bit better. Perfect, but So maybe there's an area there, and maybe there's an area down here. Revision clouds you have to close off. You can't just arbitrarily end them. So I got a couple areas here that are really more for designating when I take this into Photoshop to render it. Now let's go back to our vegetation here. Here's the nice thing about creating blocks. Now that I see these shrubs, I don't really like that style. It looks like bullet holes instead of shrubs. So you can edit any one of these by double clicking, and that brings up your block editor after you hit OK. And I will click on that and hit delete, select that middle part and hit delete, and then I'll click up in this upper right hand corner and click save, and voila, they're all updated. So that's pretty nice. All right, so what else do we want to do? You know, I don't have to trim these since this is really only the part I'll be showing. Kind of a neat thing about this too is I don't really have the time to go over it right now, but you can set your print window. So I could say anything outside of this site is just not displayed when you go to your layouts down here. But just know that you can do that. For now, I'm going to bring up my trim option, select these. Did that work? It did. All right, let's go down here, hit escape, trim, enter. You know, when in doubt, you can always select way more than you need. Hit enter and click, click. Now I can't trim that. I guess I kind of can, but oh, yeah, weird. I didn't think I could. All right, never mind. So, all right, those guys are trimmed. Are we ready to start creating some layouts? Almost. Let's do a couple hatches because I've got this area kind of set up nicely. How do you do a hatch? Well, you type the word hatch and hit enter. And it wants to active select. So can we pre-select? Let's. Ooh, I don't like that. That I don't like. Let's try this. Let's hit escape. I'm going to type hatch. What are my options? Select objects, undo, or settings. Let's do T for settings. And here is what this looks like. Let's see, add pick points. Let's see what that does. I want to do that point, and I want to do that point. All right, that works well. So I'll hit return. And I thought it would take me back to my settings. It did not, but I bet you if you start typing hatch, when in doubt, just start typing. And look at, hey, there's a hatch edit option. That's nice. So I'll click on this hatch, and it brings up this screen that I wanted to see. What would be a good boardwalk type style? You know, when in doubt, just kind of look through until you see something that you like. Custom. You know what? Let's do cork. Oh, but this one, dome it. I don't know what it is, but that's going to be my boardwalk pattern. And my scale, I can tell it's going to be way too small, so I'm going to try 10. Really going more just for a visual effect here, not a construction document. Let's hit OK. That's a bit big. So I could bring up my hatch edit again, or I can just type properties. That brings up my properties dialog over here. That's kind of nice because now I can click on this hatch and also set it over here. If I can scroll down, which it's way over here, so I can change the scale to maybe 5. Let's try a little bit more. Let's try 7.5. Hit escape. All right, that's probably a pretty big board, but you know what? We'll call it good. Also, is that in? Oh, that's under my cattails layer. That's no good. So let's select that hatch and go back to the home, and let's set that to boardwalk. I made my cattails and my boardwalk the same color for some reason. Let's change that. Let's make cattails. Oh, how about that one there? Or maybe this one. There we go. Now it's just different. Okay, so that takes care of that. How about a hatch in our walkway? I'll do a sand hatch. Hatch, once again, T, enter to bring up my settings, and I'll pick points because I saw something. There might be gaps, etc. Show details. Reading. Notice how before it saw that as one big shape. So I'm going to try two things here. I'm going to zoom out, hit escape, type regen, hit enter. This might help, it might not. Let's try hatch again. Alright, it's still not quite. I kind of cleared off that point, but somehow it shouldn't be picking all of that. Hit escape. Regen once again. How do you fix it? Well, you know what? Here's kind of a weird way to do it, but watch this. I'm going to start zigzagging a few lines around here. Hit escape. Why did I do that? Well, sometimes that helps you identify where the problem is. Okay, so this is telling me the leak is somewhere in here because those are all identifying the correct areas. Hey, this is all right. I'm kind of glad I did this because it's creating a little problem to solve. So I'm going to hit erase, enter, click that and hit enter. Now, so it's somewhere in here. All right, let's do this. Let's do a polyline edit. Now, of course, this only works if you're trying to draw something similar and if you're running into the same problem. So you may not be having this problem. If you do, here's a good way to fix it. Polyline edit, and then I'll do M for multiple. And I'll do this guy, and this gal. Maybe that one's a girl. Then I'll hit enter, and I will convert these to polylines, and I'm going to select join. Enter fuzz distance, 0 is fine, and then you can hit escape. What did that do? It now turned that into one line. Now, hopefully, I can pick my point. Ah, success. All right, so now it is good. Hatch, edit. Now, if I wasn't multitasking here, I'd probably be able to do this correctly the first time. Now, where did I see? I thought I saw one. There we go. AR for sand. And maybe the scale, I want to try 5. And hit OK. That's not so bad. Select it and get it in the right layer, which should be path. Okay. And how about the sand? That sand, maybe I'll do the same thing, but I'll make it a little bit finer detail. So once again, hatch. Area, enter. Can you double click on a hatch? I guess you kind of can. It doesn't really do what I want it to, but watch this. I'll do an MA again, match properties, click on this sand, and then click on that sand. You can use match properties for all kinds of things. All right, so let's hit escape. Now I'll select it and change the line type, or I'm sorry, the scale over here. Let's make that one 3. Oh, now it's a little bit finer, and also set it to the correct layer. Remember what I said about layers? All kinds of rules and conventions, but for the most part, I like to associate a layer with a material, and you'll see why here in a moment. All right, what do we got? We got some structures, we got some vegetation. Anything else I could change? You know what? I'm gonna do a quick copy of a tree here. Just feel like there should be more up here. And I'll type rotate and just rotate this guy a little bit so it's not totally the same. All right, so there we go. We got some designy type stuff. Now we can start doing the layout. So if you want, take a breather, pause. Maybe I should have made this 2 videos because I know this is getting very long. If you would like to pause, I'm sure I'll still be here when you return. Okay, we got 2 layouts by default. That's a part of the template. Incidentally, well, you know, while I'm thinking about templates, I could delete everything, hit delete. That would keep all of my layers, and then I could go up here and do a save as drawing template. And then whenever you open this up, all of these layers would be in there for you, so you wouldn't have to recreate them all. So just an FYI, drawing templates are simply AutoCAD drawings. You could even include things in your model. I won't have to delete this. I could make this a drawing template so this opened up every single time. But on to layouts. This particular one had 2 layouts. Let's get rid of one. So I'm going to right click on layout 2 and hit delete, because we'll get one set up first. Now this part is really super important because these need to align with one another, and if you do this the wrong way, it kind of creates a headache. So layout 2, this just represents my paper space. And you can zoom in and out relative to this piece of paper, not unlike when you were in model space. If you double click inside of this viewport, that is the rectangular area in the middle, you are now in your model space, and now zooming and panning is relative to that. And if I double click out, now I'm back out here. So just know that double clicking will take you in and out of a viewport. I don't want to see this grid. It won't print, but I don't want to see the grid. How come it's not turned on down here though? I can see it, but it's not turned on. That's because it's on in the model space. So if I double click, now I can turn off the grid display. There we go. Double click out here. Now I can move this viewport. I'll move the viewport just to the outside of the printable area. And for some reason, my viewport is set to cattails. I don't know why. I'll set my viewport to layer 0 and hit escape. Now, before I jump into the scale, I'm looking for something else up here. There is a way to lock a layout, which comes in handy in a moment, but if I can't find it for now, we'll just have to live with it. All right, so I'm going to select this viewport, and with that viewport selected, you will see a scale down here. You only see it if that viewport is selected. Also, you don't want to be inside. Well, maybe that would work too. Typically, I think you can be inside the model space or have the viewport selected, but what you cannot do is just be arbitrarily outside of it, and I don't see anything. So if you don't see your scale, just know you have to highlight that viewport. Also, if you double click on the viewport edge, it kind of takes you into this hybrid model space. Now we're back in model space, kind of, but we're still in our layout. And it's more of a model-y type view. To get out of this, you have to go to your model space, then back to the layout tab. So if you accidentally double click on the viewport edge, that happens. All right, so viewport is selected. Hit this guy down here. All right, well, we drew that at 300 feet. If you started with the acad.dwt template, this is an 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of paper. Well, if you do the math, you can set this to 1 to 50, and that is saying 1 unit of this paper, which is set to inches, is equal to 50 units of my model world, which is feet. I know it's feet. Again, AutoCAD is really unitless, but since we drew this as feet, it just knows that it is. So 1 to 50, hey, there we go. So now if I were to measure that, it would measure 6 inches, which looks about right if this is an 8.5 inch by 11 inch sheet of paper. All right, I'm going to double click to pan, and I'm just going to try to center this. So there we go. When you are done, double click out here, highlight that edge, and make sure it is set to 1 to 50 down here. So once again, keep in mind, I'm doing all of this to set it up so you can jump right into chapter 17 of the digital drawing textbook. But typically layouts are used for creating any kind of presentational media or construction documents, and you can have multiple views into your model at different scales, at different angles, etc. We are just doing this so we can export a handful of scenes that are aligned when we go into Photoshop. Also, the reason I am including a little bit of extra space here is if you have the student version, which you probably do, you're going to have an educational stamp around the edges. And you know what? While I'm talking about that, just a warning. That is almost like a virus, but it's very clear in its intent. You are not supposed to use AutoCAD for commercial purposes. But why is it like a virus? If you ever find yourself at an internship, do not use the education version for anything. Even if you created this tree in the student version, and at a firm that you are interning at, try to put that inside of another model, even on a different computer, it will then inherit the educational stamp. If any part of your drawing was created with the education version, that stamp will then be applied. And people generally, especially clients, tend not to like created by educational product all over their map. All right, but enough about that. A couple other things. So we've set our scale to 1 to 50. And I think I just remembered where that lock is. It is, I've got my viewport highlighted underneath my properties dialog. Is it on here? Display locked. All right, so the display locked option, if I set that to yes, that will prevent you from editing the scale or position, which is important, as you'll see here in a moment. Because now, if I double click on here, I'm kind of guessing here, I hope this works, double click. I'm in model space, but if I zoom, I'm no longer zooming in and out of my model space. I'm still zooming in and out of my paper space. That's important because I don't want this to move on the subsequent copies that I will create very shortly. So double click over here. Here's another thing. When you take this into Photoshop, colors are not really that important because we're just going to be setting up some masks. And somewhat related, you maybe don't want to print this in color. Well, this is where our pen types or pen modes, I forget the exact terminology, but it is things that have a .ctb extension. If you right click over your layout tab and go to page setup manager, incidentally, this is where you can create copies, I believe. You can modify, you can import, etc. Let's do modify. And here's where you can change the paper size, the areas to plot, the scales, etc. This is really old school AutoCAD. Before you had the ability to set a viewport scale here, you had to do the math here. But the plot style table pen assignments, here is where you can set these to other things like monochrome. Okay, grayscale will inherit the tonal value of the color, but it will still be a tone of gray. Monochrome is just black and white. That's the one you want to set for this exercise, especially my students. And display plot styles needs to be checked. Hit OK, hit close. Look what happens. Now it's just black and white. If you were to print it, that's what you would see. So let's rename this one. How do you rename it? You right click and do rename. And I will call this all on. Okay. How many layers do you need? Well, I would recommend you open up chapter 17 of this book, or you think about how you render in Photoshop. You have to kind of change your mindset a little bit here, and also think about how things are masked in Photoshop layers. Layers being a very important word here. And when in doubt, draw up something similar to mine and follow a similar procedure here. So I'll start with the ground. I just want the ground lines, which would consist of my pathway and this water edge. So how do you just turn those on? First thing we want to do is make a copy. So I will right click, select move or copy, and click this, hit OK. All on two. Now I will rename that and just call it ground plane. So these are identical. What else are we going to want to change? You know what? We'll just do this one first, then I'll come back here and add these as necessary. I will click on this viewport, and I'm going to go back to my layers manager. You've maybe noticed in the layers, you've got on, off, freeze, lock, color, etc. Print freeze, layer freeze, viewpoint freeze. I won't explain what all of these mean, but I will explain what viewport freeze does. With this viewport selected, you can freeze or turn off these layers. I'll get rid of properties. I don't think I need that one anymore. And I want this to be on layer 0. Okay, so what do I want to show in my ground plane? Do I want the boardwalk? Nah, probably not. Whoops, I unselected it, that's why. Viewport selected, and I think I know what I need to do. I need to be in the viewport, not just have it selected. My bad, I apologize. I will double click. Now I'm in the viewport. Now I can viewport freeze. There it goes. All right. Cattails, I don't want. Path, I do want. Sand, site. Ooh, I want to keep the site on all of these. Structures, vegetation, water's edge. So here's all I want. And I've just noticed a small error. Not really an error, but if I wanted to mask this area, that's going to be a problem. This little gap right here. And that's a little presentational dilemma because I trimmed it out as I was drawing it in. It's an easy fix. This is done. So I will jump over to model space, come in here, and I'll do polyline or P-line. Zoom in really far. Let's do shift right click, select endpoint. I'll draw a line from there to, and now I really recommend always use snaps. I could just kind of eye it, but that will be problematic. So either turn on your object snaps, do the shift right click, or type the snap. In this situation it would be end, so I can type END, hit enter, and then that will turn on the end snap and hit escape. All right, it's on a different layer. How do we fix it? If you said MA for match attributes, you are correct. Okay, so now that part is done. Look what happens when I go back to ground plane. All right, that one is all done. Let's make another copy. Move or copy, create a copy, and right away I will rename this one to, how about, structures. Make sure that one is highlighted. Double click to be in that viewport and scroll over to your viewport freeze. I want this time only my structures turned on. Whoops. So we got sand. All right. There's not a lot. I want my site. The site is important. That's really your benchmark for aligning all of these. Now, since we're being so careful about making sure these are perfectly aligned, we don't really need it, but good habit, just keep it on there. So there's my structures. Again, I know this is a very simple model. It might seem overly complicated for what we're doing, but when your models get more complicated, this will help you out a lot. All right, that one is done. And as I cycle through these, you can see they are perfectly aligned. They make a lot of sense. All right, what else? Vegetation. So I will make a copy once more. And we'll call this vegetation. Double click to go into my viewport. And whoops. Oh, you know what? I'm doing this the hard way. Turn them all off. How about doing that way? So site, we will want vegetation. Well, let's turn on the cattails. Remember when I created, I was kind of going back and forth. Well, should I put that in its own layer? There can be a little bit of disconnect here. This is kind of like a custom layer just for this viewport here. So that one looks good. What have we not included yet? Oh, the sand area and the boardwalk area. Let's see. And my path is good. All right. You know what? So let's do another copy. Create a copy. Rename it right away to boardwalk and sand. Highlight it, double click. A lot of repetition here. Boardwalk, site, sand, and vegetation. No, that's off. All right, so once again, I see a little error. Not really an error, but it would be problematic. I want that to be closed up. And here's a really big difference between AutoCAD and SketchUp. AutoCAD can have multiple lines existing on top of one another, and it always knows they are separate. SketchUp cannot. If two free-flowing geometries are on top of each other, it just automatically fuses them. But there's a little bit more fixing we need to do. Remember, I did this when I connected that small edge. This one's a little bit trickier, but not totally undoable. Now, this is not a straight line. This is a slight curve here. Same over here. So I could just polyline and connect those 2 points, but I want this to be absolutely perfect. So here's what I will do. I'm going to pre-select that polyline and this one over here. And then I'm going to right click, go to clipboard, and copy with base point. Now my base point will be right at the very end here. You know what? This time I'll turn on my object snap. Click. All right. That is now copied to my clipboard. I'll hit escape. Type TR for trim. Why am I doing this? You'll see here in a moment. Select that bunch there. Right click to go to the next step. Now I can click here. I can click there. I can click here, and I can click here. That gives me that nice subtle curve right along my boardwalk. I'll hit escape. MA for match attributes. I'll just go from the from first to here to here. So that part is now complete. How do we bring that one back? Well, remember, I copied it with a very specific base point. So sometimes you need to click and hold, right click and hold until you see this dialog. If you have a little trouble getting that to show up, you can always go up to, I believe here, somewhere, insert, or you can just do Control V. I'm thinking this over too much. So Control V, just a standard paste. And where was that paste? Remember, it was right at that endpoint. All right, all is right with the world. How about this guy now? Same thing. Select the shape, right click, clipboard, copy with base point, and I'm going to do the intersection right there. Hit escape, TR, enter, select these guys, right click, enter, click, click, MA, match attributes there and there. All right, did you get all that? Control V for paste. There we go. Now, as you're working on these models, you'll sometimes notice things get a little jaggedy. The more you zoom in and out, things don't quite visually align as well as you think they should. Now, I can't quite break this one as bad as I would like, but always remember that you've got regen in your back pocket. Regen stands for regenerate, and AutoCAD will recalculate. The reason things tend to get jaggedy is because it is just trying to optimize its drawing environment, and regenerate will usually solve that for you. So let's go back. All right, now that looks good. Oops, I forgot that little guy there. Now that one is a straight edge. Those are straight edges, so this one I can just do it this way, and I'll be careful. This time I'll set it to boardwalk. Type P line. I'll go to there. I'll click there, and then I will click here, and then hit escape when I am done. Now, all right, that is a nice shape that is very easily maskable. I've got all of my vegetation. I've got my structures. I've got my ground plane, and here's my all on. Guess what? We're almost done. The last thing we need to do before we go into the rendering part, which again I'm not doing in this video, is export this. And you know what? Save it. This is like the second time I've saved this file. I recommend saving more than that. How do we export this to a PDF? Well, you can click on this little icon up here, go to export, and select PDF. And I recommend you do this to verify that things are in fact aligned. And I will put this in that same folder I have been working with, which I believe is right here. And what am I going to export? PDF. And I can either do my current layout, which is all on, or I can do all layouts. This all looks good, all looks good. Let's hit save. It published them. Let's jump to the desktop and take a look. If you open it up and scroll through the pages, everything should align. Which are they? Only one page came along, so I did something wrong here. Let's go back. This time, I don't think it makes a difference, but I'm going to hold down Shift and click on the first and last one. I didn't do something correct there, but let's try that one more time. Export PDF. This is also why you want to double check this to make sure it worked. Let's call it Basic Drawing 2 PDF. All layouts. Save. You'll notice that the time is now 11:23, which is why I'm having a little bit of trouble getting this to work. There we go. Now I have 5 sheets, and they all align very conveniently. And it's a vector-based drawing, so it doesn't really matter the size that we drew this, because when I import this into Photoshop, you can rasterize it and essentially create any resolution that you would like. It's all good. What's the final thing that I would recommend? Naming. I'm always a fan of logical naming. So if you don't do it from the start, do it after the fact. Let's go ahead and close AutoCAD. Save this drawing. And we'll call this, let's call it Matt's Park. And my blocks, basic drawing, that all looks good. Get rid of that one, that was a mistake. And we'll call this exported layouts. The backup, it doesn't hurt to keep it, but I'll delete it just to kind of keep things nice and clean. All right, and here's my 3 blocks I created. There's my AutoCAD drawing. There's that, all conveniently in this folder. As always, let me know if you have any questions. That is my tutorial. I will create another video that will be more of a walkthrough and a play off of the book Digital Drawing for Landscape Architecture and Rendering. It seems like a lot of work, but trust me, at the end of the day, it really is easy and convenient. And if you're not talking, as I'm doing through the process, it really is very fast. So there you go. Good luck.